Welcome back to The Accidental Writer at the Alex Cafe. We've got a fabulous program for you today.
If you say so yourself.
If I say so, which I will. We're starting off with Michael Hanrahan, who is the publishing director at Central Publishing, and he's going to give us an insight into self-publishing.
Yeah, that was truly interesting. And we also have Laura Fisher, who's being interviewed by our resident poet Hamish. And the good thing about Laura is she does some nonsense verse, and geez, I love nonsense.
And we finish with Christiian White, who is a brilliant author in the genre of...
What would you call it? True crime and mysteries, and...
Or thriller. It was a kind of little bit of everything.
So I love that stuff.
Yeah. So he's written 2 books, and he'll be sharing those with us today.
Which we devoured.
Michael, thanks for joining us. You're the publishing director at Published Central.
Yep.
Tell us a bit about how you got into the industry.
So I've been around writing and publishing my whole life. My dad was a writer. I got my first paid writing gig at 15 years old. Did a writing and editing degree at Deakin University with the aim of becoming a professional writer, and then realised how hard that actually is. And if you want to get paid, it's actually easier to become an editor. So I became an editor, got a job at a small publishing company, which was then taken over by John Wiley and Sons, where I eventually became managing editor. Then I left to become a freelance editor, and after a few years that turned into Published Central.
So it's basically been your life.
Yeah, very much so. Some of my earliest memories as a kid were Dad sitting at the dinner table with his editor, and I remember thinking, gee, that seems like a really cool thing to do. So yeah, been around this stuff for a very long time.
Gee, that's a heritage.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, we had a house full of books. Dad would literally make homemade bookshelves above the bathroom, and there were just books everywhere.
So you got no excuse for being a little bit thick or uninformed.
No, that's all my fault. So yeah, but no, books everywhere.
And you're focused on the self-published author?
Yes, so we, when I was freelance editing, we noticed about 5 or 6 years ago a real trend towards self-publishing. So we'd done maybe 4 or 5 self-published books over a course of about 10 years.
That's yourselves?
Yes,
yeah.
yes. And then we noticed that we did about 4 or 5 self-published books within about 12 months, so for our clients. And so we're like, hang on, this is really starting to take off. So we steered our business towards self-publishing. That was about 5 years ago. We started focusing specifically on that.
And now the number you've published?
I couldn't tell you exactly. It would be over 100 books. Yeah, we've been doing 35 books for about 3 or 4 years now.
Wow, that's incredibly prolific. Can I just make an important distinction between self-publishing and vanity publishing? Could you explore that? Vanity publishing is notoriously a rort and a rip-off.
Yeah.
So could you sort of explain how that all works?
Yeah, vanity publishing's got a really bad reputation, and rightfully so. Most often it's vanity publishers are publishers that present themselves as a publishing company, but they're really not, and the author ends up paying to produce the book. So what they're really doing is underwriting the production of their own book, but then the company shares in the profits if the book happens to sell well. So it's really not a good model.
Do they distribute genuinely? Or do they just print them and stick them in a box?
The good ones do, if you can say there's good ones. And it's usually a hybrid publishing model. And some of them, there are some very legitimate hybrid partnership publishing companies out there, but the dodgy ones, I had an author ring me up last year, and I won't use any names, but rang me up on the eve of the launch of his book. He had like 30 copies of his book. It wasn't listed on Amazon. It was nowhere to be found, and he was launching in a couple of days, and he was tearing his hair out. He didn't know what to do. So that's the real downside of vanity publishing, and everyone in publishing has heard all sorts of stories like that.
Yeah, and you know, I see these ads, being a long time writer but not what you call super successful, you know, they're very attractive. So how are you different?
So the vanity publishers make it sound like they're traditional publishers, and that's how they hook people in, so uneducated authors, and they make it sound like, oh, we'll assess your manuscript, and then, you know, they email you back and say, oh, we love your book, it's fantastic, pay us 20 grand and we'll publish it for you. But then what happens is they pay a royalty and they share the profits with the author. So like say the author's underwriting the cost of the book and then sharing the profits with the company.
Sometimes that's fair enough because it's such a high risk business.
Yeah, like say if it's a legitimate deal, yeah, there are companies out there doing that legitimately. legitimately, but if you're going to get ripped off, that's how it's most likely to happen. The difference with us is, number one, the quality of the work. So everyone on our team has experience at the major publishers. I used to be managing editor at Wiley, like I mentioned. Our senior editor used to work at Wiley. One of our freelancers used to work at Penguin and Lonely Planet. So like we've talked about, we produce books to the same standards as the major publishers. I'd put those next to a book from Penguin any day of the week.
There's a pile here, if you can see it, viewers, and they're gorgeous.
Yeah.
So let's talk about then the difference with the traditional publishing and self-publishing. Traditional publishers may well say that unless you were published that way, you're not really published, but yet there is still a great market for the self-publishing industry. So tell us a bit about the difference there, and why would you go self instead of traditional?
Yeah, for sure. So self-publishing has become a really legitimate option about the last 5 or 10 years as for serious authors. The main reason is the difference in the qualities of the books you can produce. So self-publishing, I could spot a self-published book 15 years ago from 10 feet away. They looked terrible, the printing was horrible. You really couldn't produce them to the same standards as the major publishers, but these days you can, which is a lot of that's to do with printing technology and desktop publishing technology. In terms of the differences between traditional publishing and self-publishing, the main difference with traditional publishing is you don't have to pay to get your book produced, obviously. So the publisher, so Penguin or whoever it is, pays all the costs, and you just submit the manuscript, and if you get picked up, you get paid a royalty for any books that sell. With self-publishing, you pay all of the costs. So the authors we work with, they pay 100% of the costs, and they make 100% of the profits or the losses. So if our authors sell 100 books, 1,000 books, 10,000 books, we don't make any more or less money. They're just paying us to physically produce the book for them.
And is there one genre, one genre more than another that would go towards self-publishing rather than traditional?
Yeah, so we specialise in what we call self-publishing for small business, and that's because of my background at Wiley. And small business authors love self-publishing because there's a few reasons. Number one, traditional publishing takes a lot longer. So you can easily have to wait 12 or 18 months for your book to get published with a traditional publisher, which if you've written a novel and it's your dream to get published by Penguin, you're not going to mind waiting 18 months. But if you're a business author, that's money that you're losing if your book takes 18 months to come out. So the other big advantage for self-publishing business authors is they retain full control of the book. So they don't have a publishing company tell them what to do with the cover and the title of the book and that kind of thing. So that's during the production of the book. And the other advantage is once it comes out, they can do whatever they want with it. So our authors turn their books into podcasts, they turn them into blogs, they turn them into courses, all these sorts of things, which there'd be restrictions on that sort of stuff if you're working with a traditional publisher.
That's an important secondary market.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I mean, my book, I published a book about how to self-publish a book, and I've turned it into blogs, I've turned it into a course and all this kind of thing. If you go through and read a year's worth of blogs on our website, you're basically getting my book. And now some authors would say, well, hang on, you're giving your book away. And the answer is, yeah, of course I am. I don't care. It's a marketing tool for my business. So if I help people publish a book, if they read my blog and they come to me for work, however they get my material, I'm fine. I'm not worried about making $3 on a book sale.
But I would argue that even if you didn't have a business to promote that way, that does promote the book. So typically you would want an extract in a major publication.
Absolutely.
And that's a loss leader to bring in the punters.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We've had a lot of authors get on TV in the last 12, 18 months, get articles in magazines, like you say, extracts, so many weekend magazines and that kind of thing publish extracts from newly published books. So yeah, our authors have had a lot of success with that sort of thing lately.
Do you help your authors get that sort of access?
We specifically don't. We like to stick to what we're good at, but we have a PR company that we work with. So our authors who want that service, some authors do it themselves, some authors have their own PR and marketing companies, that kind of thing. But authors who need that help, we've got someone we send them on to for that.
And do you publish all books that come to you, or do you go through them, read them and reject some, accept others?
Yeah, no, unusually for a self-publishing company, we do actually reject some books.
That'd be a kick in the nuts, really.
Yeah, it's people are a bit shocked sometimes. I see it as my job to help authors get good books out there. And if their book's just not up to standard, and we get a few books every year that I had a book a few years, I just couldn't make heads or tails of it, and I sent it back to the author and said he needed to do a few more drafts. So yeah, we do knock back books. We're not helping the author say, hey, this is great, pay us $15,000, we'll put it out there, and the book comes out and everybody says this book's rubbish. So we haven't helped the author at all. So we do knock back books. We don't just I had an author a year or two ago who was sitting in my office with a cheque ready to pay her deposit, and her book was rubbish. I was just like, I'm sorry, we're not signing you up. You need to go away and do more work on your book.
Can I tell you a story about this book here, which I'll give you a copy? So
great.
I self-published it 15 years ago. Prior to self-publishing it, I sent it to an editor who said it was rubbish and you need to make these changes. And that was really important. You don't get better without some very difficult contested conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very important part of the process. So we,
But you don't have that process as often in self-publishing.
Well, we do. Actually, we do that with our authors. So when authors send us a manuscript, the first thing we do is we assess the manuscript and we tell them what level of editing we think it needs.
So what I want to do is give this to you, ask you back, and tell me what went wrong. What should we do now if you were going to self-publish it? Remember, this was 15 years ago. It needs an edit, needs another edit.
Yeah.
Because I'm a very repetitive writer, needs another edit, and it also, I'd just be interested to see what you say about the mistakes I made with Amazon. Still on Amazon, but sort of not.
So we also do ebooks for our authors. So that's an entirely different format, an entirely different process. So you're a bit crazy these days if you don't do an ebook. So if you publish a book these days, people are going to say, where can I get the ebook?
Yeah.
So it's pretty much essential these days.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming and sharing. I think it's been really insightful for a lot of people who will be looking at going
Thanks for
down the
having me.
self-publishing track.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thanks. You're an award-winning and national bestseller of 2 fabulous books with a third on the way.
Let's start with the first one, The Nowhere Child, and I'll just summarise it for the viewer.
Great.
Don't give away anything.
Well,
It's tricky without spoilers, but I believe in you. And we've got
Don't
the magic of
spoil it.
editing.
You
can cut it out.
believe in me.
You could bleep it.
Okay.
Don't spoil it. That's all I'm saying.
I think it's difficult to spoil because the point about this, your writing, and I think this goes for both of those books, is that you give away 90% of the facts that the reader has to undertake very quickly. So very quickly, we all know everything. And the brilliant thing about both books is the final denouement where you have the twist. So I think they actually share a methodology. So it's, as I was preparing this, I thought, it's going to be bloody hard for me to stuff this up and give away the plot because Christian's given away the plot.
Yeah, you kind of know straight up front.
Straight away.
I like just dumping it right up front so you sort of know what it's going to be about. And yeah, they're both like that. Especially the first book. In the first couple of pages, it's set up.
So let me just tell the audience member what's happening. It takes place in 2 places. I always used to talk about bumfuck Idaho, but this is
This is Bumfuck, Kentucky.
Bumfuck, Kentucky, and Melbourne. And in Melbourne, there's a 30-year-old photographer, and in Bumfuck, Kentucky, there's, a family. And a fundamentalist Christian family, and they are drawn together because the Christian family had a child stolen, and very quickly you find an assertion that the woman in Melbourne is the stolen child.
That was very well put. That's a difficult...
You don't have to suck up to me. I've already said that I'm going to.
You're doing a great job. I'm actually fishing for myself, but it's a tricky thing to sum up. But you nailed it.
So let me talk about the Melbourne protagonist. She's a photographer, and I think she's a lovely person. Was
nice.
that your intention? Is she
Yeah, I not so much lovely, but passive. I really wanted her to be a passive character because I knew that the world that she was going to go into, she was going to go over to Kentucky, and as you said, they're fundamentalist Christians. It's a lot about Pentecostal snake handling, and there's this sort of crazy, rich, colourful, giant world that she's going to be going into. So I wanted to make her just passive because she's going to be, she's our gateway in. She's who we sort of anchor ourselves to and into this world. And it was, I think. I don't think I did this consciously at the time, but I think subconsciously I did two things. One was I think I based her on my sister, my older sister Nikki, and I didn't realise this until I think it was my wife Sam who said, "Oh, Kim, the main character, that's Nikki, that's your sister," and it hadn't occurred to me, but she is this extraordinarily. I think both, my sister and Kim from the book, they're very, they're really strong women, but they're also. They suffer in silence. They're quiet and they're shy and they're passive. And I think the other inspiration, subconscious inspiration...
But they're not dickheads. The point is stuff happens to Kim and she's not a dickhead.
And she does things, I think, or I hope, that normal people would do in her situation. So her actions make sense and, we follow her. But yeah, I'm also really inspired. One of my favourite authors of all time is Haruki Murakami, and his characters are... usually, 90% of the time, really passive. And I'm really drawn to that, and I kind of wanted, halfway through the writing or toward the end, I kind of had this idea that I wanted this book to feel like a Murakami character had walked out of the Murakami book and into a Stephen King novel. I kind of wanted that sort of, that idea. And again, God knows if I answered your question. But yeah, that's...
Once again, this is your second book.
Yes.
Can I just, for the long-standing, resilient watcher of this show, just summarise where we are with this? And it starts off, it goes from two perspectives. It's called The Wife and the Widow.
Yes.
So we look at, and both the wife and the widow take it in turns to have a chapter in turn.
Yeah.
And the widow is someone whose husband died, obviously.
In the title.
In the title was murdered.
Yep.
And the wife, I better not give this away, but the wife is related to it, and you find out that she's got a relationship to the murder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then when you find out that relationship, say halfway through the book, you think, okay, it says on the dust cover there's going to be this dazzling twist. Well, bloody hell, I was totally dazzled.
Good, I'm so
I was
glad.
totally, you bastard.
Oh, good. That's the response I want to be called.
And at the end of the book... At the end of the book, you're not a bastard, you're a bloody bastard. At the end of the book, it was wonderful. It was dazzling writing. And at the end of the book, there's a few extra lines about, explanatory lines about you.
Yeah, and
a bit about the author.
Yeah.
And geez, I needed that because did you feel this? I just needed to, just to explore some of the attributes that, wouldn't ordinarily be drawn out in a novel, but you're still insatiably curious about...
Good, I love this music to my ears, I love that.
Insatiably curious, and I've decided to hate you.
Good, that's good.
And he can't wait for your next book.
Good.
And now I'm disturbed to find you don't have a weight problem, you've got a full head of hair, you haven't gone grey, you're nauseating.
I have plenty of hideous... I kill kittens sometimes, so that's...
Fantastic, that's a relief. I'm a dog person.
I'm both. Your writing process, or did you do study? How did you get into writing?
I studied a little bit. I studied screenwriting, so I'm a screenwriter as well.
Where at?
I studied at RMIT, and that was because I always wanted to write novels. That was my thing since I was. I wrote my own. The first book is the fifth manuscript I tried to write, and the second one I finished, and the first one that was anywhere near good enough to show any living person. But no, at 17 and 18, I wrote my first nearly manuscript. It was awful, terrible, but it's always been my dream. But then I thought, oh well, I've got to be realistic about it. Well, I'll study screenwriting. That's a much more realistic, and it sort of is. But it did. That really helped with writing of the books, because I really have my strength is in
graphical.
I think visuals, and characters, and I know a big part of, I think, writing is realizing what your strengths are and what your strengths are not. I did a panel recently with Pip Williams, an amazing author, and Trent Dalton, an incredible author, and I said to them both that I know I haven't got the way with words that both of those people do. I don't have that beautiful
but you can plot.
language, but I can plot and
write.
I can, so it's sort of, I think it's just about leaning into those things, and that's what studying screenwriting helped me sort of figure out. And it also
well, when you write a screenplay, half the page is about words and half the page is about pictures.
Exactly, and then there's this subtext going on, and it's about, for me, screenwriting and certainly writing books as well, it's about what you cut out. So it's about cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting and whittling back. I cut so much out, and you realise on a script
without
page,
pain,
with little pain, I'm getting better. I have no real trouble killing my darlings ever, really. Every now and then, there was a ridiculous storyline or just a little subplot in The Nowhere Child. It was in the original manuscript, and my publisher said you should take this out because it's ridiculous. And I miss it. I did because I love, but it was so insane and dumb. It was just dumb. But that's the only thing I sort of regret. I'm glad I took it out, but I regret it a little bit. But no, usually I'm pretty brutal with my own stuff.
Well, speaking of brutal, our producer's been waving at us. We've got to wind us up.
Oh,
he's a prick.
Yeah.
So can I just?
He's a prick.
Really
I wasn't going to say anything,
but he's rude, awful.
Yeah, he shoved me against a wall out here and
I
said,
know.
Yeah. But
one sentence answers then. How long did it take to write each book?
The first one, it took probably a little over 2 years. Mm-hmm. This one I wrote in under a year, but it was a very painful experience. So my third book, I've got 2 years to write it.
And
so
that's coming
out the second half of this year.
And is there a title for that one yet?
It might change, but I think the title is Wild Place. Wonderful. Yeah, which is better than the original one, which was Neighbourhood Watch. It always takes me a while to find a good title, but Wild Place is going to be the one.
I struggle with
terrible at it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We've loved having you on, and we
don't
look forward
be too nice.
Okay, I won't be. And we look forward to having you back with your next book.
Please have me back. This has been this isn't work. This has been a nice casual chat. I forgot that there's lights and cameras, but no, it's so lovely being here. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks, Christian.
Good on you, Christian. Thanks.
And welcome to the program, Laura. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Hamish.
No, it's been great to see you here. So, Laura, I've known you now for around 5 years, and you came to Melbourne some years ago from England, from something of a diverse background. But what attracted you first to Melbourne and then to the poetry and spoken word scene?
Well, I came to Melbourne for a working holiday and to take advantage of the good job opportunities, and I found that once I got here, I started to write poetry in a way that I hadn't written before, because I think I was reflecting on my life, my old life in England, that I was so separate from. I could see it with different eyes, and I was a bit depressed over an ex-boyfriend, and one of my friends said, "Oh, your poetry's good," and she said, "Come on, get out the house, we're going to a spoken word night," and she said, "I've been talking to someone and there's a good spoken word scene in Melbourne," and then the rest was history.
Yeah, because you started showing up at venues like the Dan O'Connell and Passionate Tongues, and from early on you struck me as somebody who had a real love of poetic forms, but also an ear for language, like everyday language and the way people felt about things. And the other thing that impressed me about you was your sense of like comic twists on attitudes to different things. So yeah, you definitely, in a way, there's a little bit of eccentricity there, but that's what I really appealed to me.
Yeah, I come from an eccentric family with a dark sense of humour where there's a lot of teasing, and I was brought up to read. My sister and I weren't allowed TVs in our rooms, which was the norm in my area for kids. So yeah, I was probably exposed to a lot of stuff and a lot of jokes, and you had to sort of keep on your toes in my family, and I didn't realise that I turned out to be a witty person, but I suppose I did. Yeah.
What things inspire you? Like what issues or what types of poetry inspire you?
Well, I didn't realise until you pointed out to me how inspired I was by Roald Dahl.
Yes.
Because we had the poems on tape when I was a kid, and we listened to them quite repetitively. I enjoy romantic and mystical poetry, and occasionally I write something in that style, but I find it's a hard style to write in. My favourite poet is Emily Bronte.
Ah, right, from the Bronte sisters, Yorkshire.
Yeah.
Good. You bring elements of England into your poetry, like the Yorkshire moors, like life in different cities that you've lived in, like London and Bristol, for instance, and Manchester. You tackled different things with a great streak of irreverence. Your last performance that I saw, you took on the Holy Bible in a very interesting way. Yeah, how did that come about?
Well, I was raised to be an atheist, and I started going to church to piss my dad off. And I just love religion, and I love reading religious texts, which I think have a lot of poetry in them. So I went to university to study religious studies.
Okay. Yes.
And I'm also very interested in the evolution of animals and the beginning of the world and the evolution of the mammals and our species. And so I wrote a sort of epic poem putting that all together, which took me ages.
Yeah, I was impressed with it because we hadn't seen each other, of course, for a long time with the pandemic. But what struck me about that performance was it was epic, it was fable-like, and it made me think of a writer I hadn't read in many years, who I really enjoy, Italo Calvino.
Oh, okay.
A cycle of stories about the history of life, but told in fable form, and it's a famous series that was written in the 60s known as Cosmocomics. And I found myself thinking of that, listening to you with the dichotomy between creation and evolution going on in your poetry. Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I'm interested in the origin stories of all kinds, like I like Greek myths, and we're all trying to, well, some of us are trying to work out what it means to be human, and for me that involves looking backwards.
The history of where we come from, how we've decided what our origins are, and what kinds of poetry and stories we tell about them. One of the other things you've been doing for the last few years is you've become a convener of a particular event in Melbourne, and that's Girls on Key, a poetry and spoken word group which focuses on women and people of non-binary gender. How do you find being involved with the Girls on Key?
I just love it. It's a lot of hard work, and some issues arise that you wouldn't think would arise with organising it all, but it always comes together, and we always have a great night, and it's just exposed me to a lot of different poets that I otherwise wouldn't have come across, and it's so great to support them and to give to the poetry community as well as receive. And I highly recommend anyone coming along. We're at Open Studio in Northcote on the first Wednesday of every month. Yeah,
it's a terrific event. I've been quite a number of times. Any particular poets in Melbourne that inspire you, that you have really taken to during your time here?
Oh, there's a lot. I'm a big fan of Emma Failican, who we just featured in February. Her book is just very mystical, so that's a big tick for me. I love Christine Burrows.
Yes.
I love Eddie Berger. Just so many poets inspiring me. That's why it's just such an amazing scene to be part of.
That's great. And do you have any plans for publishing or any new performances coming up in the near future?
Well, I actually have written a novel which I'd like to get published, so that is a work in progress. I've never actually submitted any poetry for publishing, but I do have an idea that I might like to write a poetic play based on the Bible in the future, but I think that would be maybe a bit further in the future, because I don't want to force poems. I sort of wait for them to come naturally, and eventually sort of I see things coming together in a sort of play, or more of a story.
Well, when you did that performance last week, you used another performance poet, Sasha Kuha, in a dialogue as part of what you were doing in your treatment of the Bible, and I found that very effective and very theatrical, in the way that was delivered. I really enjoyed it. So thank you very much, Laura. It's been a real pleasure to have you here on the program, and
Thanks so much, Hamish, and thanks to the Alex Cafe for having me.
Okay, we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the program. I certainly enjoyed every aspect of it, starting with Michael. I thought that he was very insightful with the self-publishing industry.
I did learn a lot from Michael.
What was the main thing you took from that interview?
Optimism, faith in oneself. He was optimistic.
Yeah. I think it also goes to show that there is a real need for the self-publishing industry. There's traditional publishing, and I think that with self-publishing, it's a real need for people that are in the business industry.
I just thought it was also a glorious contrast with someone else who we've interviewed who said self-publishing's crap. He was a publisher, but
I don't think he said those words.
No, I've oversimplified.
I think you've totally taken that. Put your own spin on that.
Yes. Quelle surprise. So I just thought it was a delicious contrast with some of the other voices we've heard on the show earlier.
And Laura?
Laura, well, nonsense. What's there to say about nonsense?
You love nonsense.
I love nonsense.
Right down Dick's alley.
Christian.
Oh, well, Christian was fabulous, and of course, Dick's extremely jealous because not only is he young and good looking, but he's got a full set of hair.
So, but the thing about Christian,
and he's talented.
Yeah, nauseating. But the thing was, I was sitting around reading his books, and I thought, this is a delicious part of my life where I get to sit and read really enjoyable books, have a chat with the author, and do that for a vocation. It was a bit of insight for me that, we're lucky if we get books that we can read and love. It's really a high part of being human.
Yeah,
really
so I think we're really enjoying having the opportunity to read all this brilliant work. I hope that we're portraying it and delivering it to you in a way that you're enjoying as well. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for coming.
And we'll see you next time.